Hey everyone, welcome back to another Zook Politics video. Before we get started in today's predictions, I'd just like to say that my channel's doing better than I expected. We are at 30 subscribers. If we could get some more, that would be great. So anyone who's liking my content, please subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. We're getting about 300 views on my last prediction video, which is much better than I thought I would. So please continue to support my channel. Please, any criticism would be welcomed. And keep watching my videos, and I hope you guys enjoy it. But moving into today's prediction video, we are going to be looking more at the Senate, but the title of this video was that 538 is projecting this to be a Democratic wave year. It most likely will be a Democratic wave year, more likely than having a close race, for example. And we could see in a number of these outcomes that 538 is running, the Democrats are projected to win the Senate. They have a 14% chance of winning 51 seats, and their average is obviously around 51 to 52 seats, which means that this is right about the range where the 538 predicts that it will fall. So 51 to 52 seats. Obviously, 52 seats would be a clear majority for the Democrats. But just looking at it, the Republicans are in serious trouble when you go through a number of these swing states, and the Democrats nearly have a 3-in-4 chance of carrying a chamber of Congress that they weren't necessarily going to win in January before the COVID pandemic. It was really the COVID pandemic that hit a lot of these Republicans in their states because of their refusal to wear masks. Many of them, I don't want to generalize and say all, but many Republicans didn't wear their masks and followed Donald Trump because they thought that if they didn't follow Donald Trump, it would be worse than if they were supporters of him. And that has a massive toll on voters. And we could see that their chances of holding on to the Senate are slim. It's not impossible. They have about 1-4, but the Democrats are in a clear position to not only win the Senate, not only clearly win the House, because everyone knows at this point the Democrats are going to win the House, and 538 predicts that as well, but also win the presidency, the most important prize. So this is likely going to be a Democratic wave year. And just looking at the numbers, it's clear that the Democrats are going to have a Democratic wave year. I'm not trying to say that as a Biden supporter myself. I'm just trying to say that in terms of the numbers, that the Democrats are outperforming the Republicans significantly. And if it were to be true that the Republicans were outperforming, then I would say that as well. But it simply isn't, because the math does not hold for the Republicans at this point. So moving into a number of these swing states, on the Senate map, we could see that the Democrats are only holding 12 of their seats are up for re-election, and all of those are comfortable. We see them on the East Coast, as well as New Mexico, Illinois, and on the West Coast as well. We could see that a number of these states are not competitive for the Democrats. They are holding all of their seats comfortably at this point, 12 Democratic seats, except for Michigan and Minnesota and a few others. We could see that the Republicans are playing defense in the same way that the Democrats had to play defense in 2018. And what happened in 2018? Well, the Republicans gained seats because they were on offense and because they were flooding the airways in Florida, in other swing states as well. That really helped them be put over the top in many of those states. So looking more closer into some of these states, let's start with Iowa, because that's a very close state. At this point, it was about 50-50 2 to 3 weeks ago, 50-50, Theresa Greenfield versus Joni Ernst. And we could see now that Theresa Greenfield is slightly favored to win this election. She has a projected chance of 1.1% margin in her race. 1.1% margin in a state that Donald Trump carried by nearly 10 points, 51 to 41, and Donald Trump is looking to carry. He's the slight favorite to carry Iowa at this point. And it's just a massive shift. It's a complete toss-up. I would agree with that. But to see the Democrat at this point winning in a state of Iowa, which is an ancestrally Democratic state, it is more of a left-leaning state historically, but it has become much more of a conservative state because of Donald Trump's effect on the map. because of his ability to appeal to a lot of these farmers and rural voters in the state of Iowa. So at this point, it is a tilt, and this should be a warning sign for the Republicans. Not only a warning sign, it should be a flashing red light for the Republicans in that Iowa should be a state that if they are winning the Senate, if they are winning the Senate comfortably or even by a small amount, they should be winning by a likely to a lean margin, a comfortable lean margin of 5%. But they're losing this state. I'm sorry. I'm so used to saying that Republicans are winning the state of Iowa because it has become more of a conservative state, but they are not winning this race according to 538. Yes, things can change. And yes, we can see that 2.4% of the vote share is still up for grabs. But some of that might go to Teresa Greenfield and others might go to Joni Ernst. So it is a toss-up, but Teresa Greenfield is the favorite at this point. I would not be surprised to see Joni Ernst win. In fact, I would say in my prediction video that I'll put out, so watch out for that Joni Ernst will win this race, probably by a similar margin to Teresa Greenfield right now on 538's projection. So Iowa will be a tilt towards the Democrats. And if they're tilting towards Democrats in Iowa, we know how the rest of this map is going as well. Looking at states such as Arizona, it's a likely Democratic state. In a strong conservative state, historically, a strong conservative state hasn't gone for a Democrat since 1996 in Bill Clinton, nearly 2.5 decades since the Democrats have won any sort of large race in the state of Arizona. We see that Mark Kelly has a 78% chance of victory, and he's projected to win 5.6% margin, 5.6%, 53 to 47, in a state that not only should Donald Trump be winning in, but he should be winning in comfortably. And we see that Joe Biden is projected to win a margin of about 3 to 4% over Donald Trump. So a lean margin for Joe Biden, a likely margin for Mark Kelly. I do think that Mark Kelly will overperform Joe Biden's margin. I think both will come out on top in the state of Arizona. But it's just fascinating to see a state that was just once so conservative will now have 2 Democratic senators elected, a majority for the Democrats in the House as well in the state of Arizona. So that is a massive flip. So is Iowa. And the rest of this map is very clear in terms of its projections. 83% chance for John Hickenlooper in the state of Colorado. He's carrying it by nearly 8.5 points as well. 8.5 points in a state, yes, that Hillary Clinton carried by around 5, but the Democrats are outperforming Hillary Clinton's numbers. They're outperforming Democrats in 2016 as well. This is realistically a safe Democratic state at this point. Hasn't been competitive since 2004. It's been over a decade that this state has become likely Democratic and now safe Democratic. I'm going to be giving it as likely because that's exactly what 538 projects it as, and Cory Gardner is an incumbent Republican. So he is an incumbent. He has the incumbency behind him, which is obviously a strong factor. But Colorado has become such a blue state, such a partisan state, that realistically he doesn't have a chance. So that will be a likely state as well for the Democrats. Moving forward into the rest of the predictions, we look at a state like Montana. Montana, Steve Daines has a 68% chance of victory, which I would agree with. He has more of a chance of winning than losing at this point. But Steve Bullock still has a 32% chance in a state that Donald Trump carried by a safe margin, that Mitt Romney carried by a safe margin, that John McCain almost lost to Barack Obama. Montana is an interesting state in that it generally goes towards the Republicans on the presidential election by a comfortable margin, but they're not necessarily resistant to electing Democrats. And we see that they already have an incumbent Democratic senator. So if Steve Bullock is able to change the trajectory of this race, and it's very close, that's a 3 to 4 point race at this point. So it wouldn't be impossible to see Steve Bullock come out with a tilt margin. But personally, I do think that Steve Daines will hold on to his seat by a lean margin. He will probably underperform Donald Trump as well. So that will be a lean for Steve Daines and the Republican Party, which at this point, the Republicans are at 41, and we have a number of Republican seats to get through as well. So we're starting more with the tilt states and the lean states. But just looking at the rest of this map, we see Texas, Mississippi, South Carolina, a lot of these states that, yes, will vote for the Republicans, but they're not going to vote for them by convincing margins. They're not going to be 2010 type victories, 2012 type victories for the Republicans in the Senate. And that's exactly why the Republicans are, or the Democrats are projected to win and the Republicans are projected to lose, because they are underperforming significantly. Looking at one of these safe states, we see Kentucky. We see that Mitch McConnell, yes, he has a 96% chance of victory, but look at the vote share. He has a 56% vote share in a state that Donald Trump carried by nearly 25 points. Donald Trump carried Kentucky by 25 points. And we see now that Mitch McConnell has a 96% chance of victory, which, yes, he will win. He's going to win comfortably, but he's winning by a likely margin. He's winning by a likely margin in one of the most conservative states in the entire nation. One of the most conservative states, I'll repeat that again. One of the most conservative states in the entire nation hasn't been competitive since 1996 and 1992 with Bill Clinton. It has become an incredibly safe Republican state. Donald Trump's going to be winning by a safe margin here. So the fact that Republicans are underperforming Donald Trump in the Senate is really, really bad because Donald Trump is not doing well himself. So underperforming Donald Trump in a state like Kentucky is a flashing red warning sign for the Republicans. So that will be a likely margin for Mitch McConnell. He will stay in the Senate. But unfortunately for him, he will no longer be the majority leader according to 538. North Carolina as well, projected to be a lean Democratic state. We see that Cal Cunningham seems to be getting about 50% of the vote share to Tom Tills's 47.5%. Now, this is kind of on par with the 2012 numbers for Mitt Romney. We saw him win by around 2%. And this is a state that generally does tilt towards the Republicans, but Joe Biden is slightly favored to win the state of North Carolina at this point by a similar margin. I wouldn't be surprised if Cal Cunningham actually overperforms Joe Biden on the presidential race. But just looking at it, 64% chance, projected vote share of 50% for Cal Cunningham to Tom Tillis's 48%. So that's a very close race. It's always a competitive state. North Carolina generally tilts more towards the Republicans, but because of their lack of support in even a state like Kentucky, because they are losing Iowa, because Montana is close, it would make sense for a close state to flip towards the Democrats. So that would be a lean margin for Cal Cunningham and the Democrats. That will put Democrats at 47 states. We haven't even gotten to Michigan, Minnesota yet. A number of these states will hold or flip for the Democrats as well. Moving forward, let's start with the state of South Carolina. Lindsey Graham, likely Republican state. Likely Republican state right off the bat. Yes, Lindsey Graham will win this seat. He's not going to lose in the state of South Carolina because Donald Trump as well will probably have an 8 to 9 point victory here. But looking at the vote share, I keep repeating this over and over again. It's not necessarily about who wins South Carolina. It's about the margins. It is always about the margins. And we see that Lindsey Graham is projected to carry a 5-point victory, 52 to 47, in additionally one of the most Republican states. It doesn't have a Republican Democratic senator, hasn't had one for decades. So the fact that this is a 5-point victory. Now, Jamie Harrison, granted, is a very strong candidate. Lindsey Graham is a staunch Republican. He is a Trump supporter. And we could see what that effect is having on the race. A 5-point victory in one of the most conservative states. This is a smaller margin, or running right on par with Arizona. This is running on Arizona for the Democrats. So we could see just how much trouble the Republicans are in when a state like South Carolina has a similar margin for them as Arizona, which was once a Republican state, has for the Democrats. Looking at it, 53 to 47 margin, 52 to 47 for the Republicans in the state of South Carolina. That is going to be a lean margin at this point. And that's just polling. I could give it as a likely. I think it will be a likely on election day, but 538 has it as a lean, and I'm doing 538's projection in this video, so that will be a lean margin for the Republicans. Moving forward into the state of Mississippi as well. Mississippi has a 87% chance for the Republican Cindy Hyde-Smith. Again, one of those states that the Republicans will be winning, but actually looking at the margin, we see a less than 10% victory for the Republicans in the state of Mississippi. Now, this is a state that they should be carrying by at least 20%, and we see that they are entirely underperforming their numbers. This is a 9% victory, a 9.6% victory for the Republicans in the state of Mississippi. It is known for being one of the most Republican states in the country, one of the most conservative partisan states. And we see them winning a margin of 9% in single digits in the state of Mississippi. Listen, this is just polling, and if the Republicans are not worried, then there's something wrong, because a likely margin for the Republicans in Mississippi, and not even a comfortable likely margin, is warning signs should be flashing. Warning signs should be flashing. That is the only thing I could say here. 54-44 likely margin for the Republicans in the state of Mississippi as well. Moving forward into the state of Texas. At this point, John Cornyn has an 86% chance of victory. 86% chance of victory in the state of Texas. And we see, yes, the state has been trending more towards the Democrats over the years. And that is definitely the case. We see that, yes, MJ Hager has a 14% chance of victory. But again, looking at the vote share, it's not about who's winning. We know who's going to win in the South. It is going to be the Republicans. It is about exactly what is the vote share, because that if the vote share is down in a state like Texas, we know that the vote share in Michigan will be very good for the Democrats. We know in Arizona will be very good, in a number of these toss-up states, even like Iowa and Montana. So it's about the vote share. And we see that John Cornyn is underperforming. The state has been getting closer and closer to a toss-up over the years, 53-45, a likely margin for the Republicans. And John Cornyn is likely to overperform Donald Trump in the state. Donald Trump is projected to carry this state by 3% on polling averages in 538. So even John Cornyn outperforming Donald Trump is still underperforming for what this state should be. And this state should be a safe Republican state, and has been. But we see that is changing, and the dynamics, the fundamentals of this nation is changing politically as the years continue. So Texas will be a likely margin around 8 points for John Cornyn. That will put the Republicans at 45, the Democrats at 47. Kansas as well, an interesting state. Roger Marshall does have 75% chance of winning, and I keep repeating this, I cannot repeat it more, is the fact that the chance of winning simply does not equate with the vote share. And the vote share at this point, 51-46 in a state of Kansas. Additionally, an even more conservative state than one would say for a Kentucky or a South Carolina. It is a likely Republican state, 5.1%, almost a lean margin in Kansas. Now, Barbara Boyer is a massive fundraiser. She's a much better candidate than Roger Marshall, who can be seen as more of the traditional Republican. And the Republicans are lucky, because if the former governor were to have won this primary for the Republicans, we would have seen that the Democrats are projected to win this state. Now, that's not the case, but 51-46% margin for a traditional Republican in the state of Kansas, one of the most conservative states. We see that, yes, Roger Marshall will probably run up the margin in the west side. That's a county that kind of brought a lot of these traditional Republicans to D.C. And has been fundamental towards their victories. But Barbara Boyer will probably run up the margins towards Kansas City and in that area as well. So it's going to be a close race, and a 5-point victory, the Democrats would be happy with that. A 5-point victory would be a good thing. Or a 5-point loss, rather, would be a good thing for the Democrats, because that would mean that they would be winning Arizona, they would be winning Michigan, they would be winning North Carolina, they'd be winning Virginia by a safe margin as well. So likely margin, 5.1%, right over the cusp of a lean margin. That would be likely for the Republicans at this point. Not impossible to see it as a lean on election day, but likely would be more realistic, and I would agree with that projection as well. Going into Georgia, we see that in terms of the state at large, David Perdue has a 71% chance of victory, 50 to 48, again, in a state that Donald Trump might lose. It'll probably be under 1%. I don't see him losing Donald Trump. But again, David Perdue, 50 to 48, 50 to 48, rounding up and down. That is a horrible margin in a state that Republicans like to pretend has become solid for them or is solid for them. And that's simply not the case. That is simply not the case. And 50 to 48 is really not a good look for an incumbent Republican who shouldn't even have to worry about whether his seat in Georgia is up for grabs. Lindsey Graham shouldn't have to worry whether his seat is up for grabs, and he is playing defense right now. Neither should John Cornyn. Neither should any of these senators in the South. Neither should someone like Joni Ernst in Iowa be worrying either because of Donald Trump's performance here, but she is. They are all worried because everything is indicating a Democratic wave year. As well, it is a toss-up in Georgia's special election right now, a toss-up, and Ralph Warnock, the Democrat, is actually projected to win. Now, there are a number of candidates running, but the projected vote share is still for the Democrats as well. So it is a pure toss-up. I'm not going to characterize it just because of the number of people running at this point, but I'm going to characterize Georgia's at large as lean, and I'm going to leave it as a toss-up for Georgia special. But just to see the Democrats are actually winning in the state of Georgia on the Senate level is a massive victory for them, and it is a massive blow toward the Republican Party as well. So Georgia at large will be a lean, and I will leave Georgia as a toss-up. It is possible to give it as a tilt towards the Democrats, but at this point, I don't want to do that just because the number of candidates running, and it would just make more sense to leave it as a pure toss-up. Going into Alaska at this point, we see, yes, Dan Sullivan is projected to win 80 to 20 chance of winning, but I have to repeat it again, the vote share, 51 to 44, 7-point margin in Alaska, which is traditionally one of the most conservative states in the nation. 51 to 44, this is probably as well right around where Donald Trump is going to be with his margin. He's probably going to run a likely margin towards the much, much lower end. He's going to underperform his likely margin of 2016. And that down ballot effect has a massive effect. We see in a number of these states where even if Donald Trump is slightly ahead, the Republicans are losing. When Donald Trump is way behind, the Republicans are way behind in the Senate. So it's all a down ballot effect. And because Donald Trump is losing the presidential race at this point, he will take the Republican Party down with him in the Senate and in the House. And that's just simply the fact of the matter. And that is not a partisan statement to say. This is just simply analyzing the math. And it is a 7-point victory for the Republicans. And that's actually giving them the benefit of the doubt and rounding them up to 51%. So 51 to 44, likely margin in the state of Alaska. That bumps the Republicans up to 48, so they have taken the lead at this point. But we have a number of Democratic states to get through that will give the Democrats a plurality in the Senate. Moving forward, Minnesota, 92% chance for Tina Smith. Not much to talk about here. Donald Trump, again, only lost the state by around 1 to 2%. He was the first Republican to really come close in the state of Minnesota in decades and decades. Reagan came close. He still lost despite winning every other state besides D.C. 92% chance in Minnesota. We see a comfortable likely margin, 54 to 43. This is not going to be a competitive race. This is probably going to be a similar margin. Tina Smith might actually overperform Joe Biden here. I don't see Joe Biden winning a 12-point victory in Minnesota. I think he'll win more like an 8 to a 9. But Minnesota will be likely Democratic at this point. Going to be giving that as likely towards the Democrats. As well, Michigan is also a likely margin, 52 to 46. So it's closer, but it also has to do with the fact that Donald Trump was able to win this state. Donald Trump was able to win Michigan by a 0.2% margin. And now we see that he is getting absolutely blown out in Michigan on the presidential race. He's losing by around 8. Gary Peters is running slightly behind because John James is a strong candidate, and Gary Peters is not very well known as well in the state of Michigan. So it's a number of factors that would potentially be bad for the Democrats, given Gary Peters' low name recognition, and given Joe Biden overperforming him. But still, we see him winning by a likely margin, not a comfortable likely margin, but we still see him leading in a likely margin nonetheless. So that is going to be a likely margin as well for the Democrats. And notice I didn't have to spend much time talking about Democrat weakness or whether this state is going to flip towards the Republicans, because there's no chance. And it is a very quick characterization to make, likely and likely, as well as a number of these other safe Democratic states. It is really the Republicans that are vulnerable here. And just looking at the map, you see, okay, likely margins in states that probably should be likely for the Democrats. You see safe margins in other states like Virginia, which once was a Republican state, New Mexico and Oregon as well, which once were competitive. And the Republicans really playing defense in the South, and really they'll win these seats, but they're not going to win them by good margins. And going into 2022 and 2024 as well, we are going to see massive problems for the Republican Party. Going into New Hampshire, we see a solid Democratic state at this point. I didn't even characterize it. It's 58 to 41, so that is actually a safe, solid margin. I actually forgot to characterize New Hampshire because I didn't even think it would be a safe margin according to 538. I thought it would be a likely margin or a lean margin. But 538 seems to think that New Hampshire will be a 17-point victory for the Democratic incumbent Jeanne Shaheen. 98% chance of victory, which just shows you, I thought this state was going towards the Democrats for sure, but I didn't think they were going to win by this comfortable of a margin. And the Democrats are absolutely blowing expectations out of the water, and they are doing tremendously well in terms of fundraising all over the country. So I actually should not be surprised. Maine as well. Maine is leaning Democratic, 51 to 48.6. So it's close, rounding up 51 to 49. It was really Susan Collins's vote on Judge Kavanaugh that really made the difference, as well as her vote that is going to be impending on Coney Barrett. If she decides to vote for Coney Barrett, she is losing her Senate race. She is in a tough position as a Republican in a Democratic stronghold in a Democratic leaning state. So her vote will be crucial. And voters are not forgetting Kavanaugh in this state. They're not forgetting that it was one of the most partisan decisions she made, and she likes to pretend as if she is a moderate conservative who will fight for Maine's values. And historically, she has won by safe and likely margins as a Republican in a more traditionally blue state. But her vote on Kavanaugh has turned off a lot of her conservative supporters, as well as a lot of her moderate voters who would now sway towards the Democrats. So 51 to 49, that is going to be a lean Democratic state. It's outside 1%. So looking at it, the Democrats are at 51%. They already have a majority, even if the Republicans were to win Georgia's special election as well as hold on to Maine. That would not get them there. They would have to hold on to a state like Iowa. So just looking at this, we see that the Democrats are at 51. The Republicans probably will come out on top. It's very possible that they come out on top in the special election, but I'm not going to characterize it. So 51 to 48 for the Republicans, one toss-up seat in Georgia's special election. And yes, this video was supposed to be more of the Democrats are secured in terms of the presidency, the Senate, and the House. It is going to be a wave year for the Republicans. 538 indicates that, or for the Democrats, 538 surely indicates that. So because I made so many videos on the presidency already, I didn't see any any value in going through the House. The Senate was really the only more competitive area to look at. So 51 to 48 Democrats win the Senate. They don't even need to break a tie according to 538. And according to 538, it would be 52 to 48 because this toss-up in Georgia would as well go. So the Democrats would win the Senate. they would win the presidency. They would strongly and probably pick up a few seats in the House, and it would be a Democratic victory all around. So again, thank you all for watching. Please subscribe. We're at about 320 views. I'd really like to get these videos more widespread, more wide-reaching, so people really get a chance to digest my videos, really have an opportunity to see what I'm trying to post, because I want to be as bipartisan as possible. I just want to go based on polling data, which I think is something that is lacking in the YouTube election community at this point. So please give my videos a chance. Please like and subscribe. Comment any criticism, and I will see you in the next one.